Daf Yomi, Tractate Chullin, page 50b. The last line of 50a is Amrua Rabbanan Kamed Rava Mishmed Rav Nachman Amar Lav Mi Amina L'chu La Tislo Bay, and it's now top of 50b. Bukei Sariki Haki Amar Rav Nachman Makom HaDevek Afilu Nital Kulo Kasher V'hu Shinishtayer Bo Kedei Tefisa V'chama Amar Abaye Ki Milei Batida Besora. The sages said this halacha before Rava in the name of Rav Nachman. Rava said to them, "Have I not told you not to hang on Rav Nachman?" Now turning to 50b. Onto Rav Nachman, not to hang on to empty bottles, meaning not to falsely attribute statements to him. So said Rav Nachman, with regard, we're on 50b right now. So said Rav Nachman, with regard to the place where that the rectum is attached to the hips, even if all of it was removed, the animal is kosher, and this is the halacha only where sufficient space remains of it for a hand to grip. The Gemara asks, and how much is considered sufficient to grip? Abaye said, the width of a finger. This measure is sufficient even in the case of a large bull. Hikore sapnimi amar Yehuda amarav hey nasan bar shela resh tabachia ditzipori lifnei Rabbi Mishum Rab Nasan. Ezo he kares apnimi. Sanya deve. V'chein Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha. Sanya deve. Rabbi Shmuel Amar Istum cha decharsa. The Mishnah states that if the internal rumen was perforated or most of the external rumen was torn, the animal is a treifa. With regard to this, Rabbi Yehuda says, the Rav says, Natan bar Shela, chief butcher of Tzipori, testified before Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi in the name of Rabbi Natan. Which is the internal rumen? It is the kikum. Sesum, kikum, kisum, something. C-E-C-U-M, whatever that is. And so said Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha, it is the sesum. Rabbi Yishmael said it is the opening of the rumen. Rav Asi Amar Rabbi Yochanan makom tsar yesh b'koreis ve'en yodea eze hu Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak nachol kareisa b'beiro Amar Rav Yacha bar Rav Ava Amar Rav Asi min hameitzar unemata. Rav Asi says that Rabbi Yochanan says there is a narrow place in the rumen, and this is the internal rumen. All the rest is the external rumen. But I do not know which area is the narrow place. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said the rumen has fallen in a pit, meaning since it is unknown which area is considered the narrow place, a perforation in any part of the rumen renders the animal treifa. Rav Acha bar Rav Ava says that Rav Asi says the inner rumen extends from the narrow place where the rumen begins to narrow as it approaches the gullet, and downward toward the gullet where the animal is suspended by its legs. Rabbi Yaakov bar Nachmani Amar Shmuel Makom Shin Bo Milas. Rabbi Avinu Amar Geniva Mishmei Derav Tachach Beveshes V'samach Nekores Zo Hi Kores Apnimis. Rabbi Yaakov bar Nachmani says, in the name of Shmuel, the internal rumen is the place, the rumen, that has no wool, meaning downy projections on the inside of the rumen Rabbi Avina says in the name of Geniva, who said, in the name of Rav, the handbreadth in the gullet adjacent to the rumen is the internal rumen. This is the internal rumen. Amri b'marav mishpei Rav Yossi bar Chanino. Kol hakohes kulo. Zu hi kohes apnimis. Ezu kohes achitzon. Basar hachofe es rov hakohes. Rav bar Rav Huna amar mi parata. Mai mi parato. Amar Ravavia heicha di pari tabachi. In the West, Eretz Yisrael, they said in the name of Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, the entire rumen is the internal rumen. And if so, which is the external rumen, is the flesh that envelops the majority of the rumen. On the underside of the animal, Rav bar Rav Huna says the internal rumen is the mafrata. The Gemara asks, what is the mafrata? Rav Avia said, it is a place that the butcher exposes when he opens up the animal, meaning the underside of the stomach. Okay. Benardavdi karabba baravuno malay ravaji le'amemo kol anishmaitaso mai amarlei kuluhu shaykhan bidrabba baravhuna. The Gemara recounts in Narda they practiced in accordance with the opinion of Rabba bar Rav Huna. Rav Ashi said to Amemar, one of the sages of Narda, what about all of these other statements that the internal rumen is another part of the rumen? Amemar said to him, they are all included in the definition of the rumen according to Rabba bar Rav Huna. The sisum, the opening of the stomach, and the place with no wool all face the underside of the stomach, being the mafrata. Okay. Udravasi amar Yochanan, Mai amar le, Kidebar Persha, Ravacha barava, Udrabi Avina, Yedivne, Marava Mayamarle, Hani Vadai Pligi. Rashi replied, what about the opinion that Ravasi says in the name of Yochanan, that the internal rumen is an unknown narrow area? Shouldn't the entire rumen be treated as the internal rumen? Amemar said to him, Rav bar Ava already explained that it is the area extending from the narrow place until the gullet. This area is also included in the mafrata. Rav Ashi asked further, and what of the opinion of Rabbi Avina that the internal rumen is the handbreadth near the gullet, and of the residents of the West, Eretz Yisrael, that is the entire rumen? And Meimar said to him, these opinions certainly disagree with that of Rabba bar Rav Huna, but we do not follow them. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Bigedoila Kule Amar Rab Binyamin bar Yefes Amar Rabbi Elazar Lo Gedola Mamash Lo Ketana Mamash Ela Kol Shenikra Ba Tefach Vela Haviruba Zo Ki Shishaninu Bigedoila Tefach Ruba velo havi tefach. Zohi shishaninu biktana beruba. The Mishnah states, Rabbi Yehuda says with regard to a tear in the external rumen, for a large animal, a tear of 1 hand breadth renders it a treifa, while for a small animal, it is a treifa only if most of it was torn. Rabbi Benjamin bar Yefet says that the Rabbi Elazar says the word large is not referring literally to a large animal, and the word small is not literally referring to a small animal. Rather, concerning any animal large enough that its external rumen can be torn one handbreadth, and this does not constitute most of it. This is what we learned. For a large animal, a tear of one handbreadth renders it a treifa, and concerning any animal small enough that most of its external rumen can be torn, and this does not constitute one handbreadth, and this is what we learned. For a small animal, it is a treifa only if most of it was torn. In other words, any external rumen torn, either one handbreadth or in its majority, renders the animal a treifa. Ruba belohave tefach pshita lo tzricha. Dehavya tefach b'mashu mahu detema ad demikara ba tefach la havi treifa kamash benam. The Gemara asks if most of the external rumen is torn, but it does not constitute a handbreadth. Isn't it obvious that the animal is rendered a treifa? There is a principle that the majority of an entity is considered like all of it. The Gemara responds, no. It is necessary to teach this for a case where the tear would constitute a handbreadth with any amount more than a majority. Meaning the external rumen is slightly smaller than 2 handbreadths. Lest you say that, in such a case, the animal is not a treifa until a handbreadth of it is torn. This halacha teaches us that it is not so. Rather, if the majority of the rumen is torn, the animal is a treifa even if this constitutes less than a handbreadth. Amar Geniva, Amar Vasi, Nikderab Kasela, Treifa, She'im Timatach, Ta'amod, Ala Tefach, Amar Rabbi Chia Bar Abba, Didi, Mi Parsha, Li Mine de Geniva, Amabra, Harda'a Kasela Keshera, Yaser Kesela Treifa. Kam Yaser Mi Kesela Amr of Yosef, Kegon de Ayelan, Telat, Kashayasa, Betzipa, Beduchka, Belo Tzipa Beravcha. Geniva says that Rabbi Asi says, if a round hole was bored through, the external rumen as large as a sela coin, the animal is a treifa, since if a hole of such size will be stretched, it will reach the length of a handbreadth. Rabbi Chia Bar Abba said, this matter was explained to me personally by Geneva himself, where we were on the ferry of Narda. If the hole is exactly as large as a sela, the animal is kosher. If the size of the hole is greater than a sela, it is a treifa. The Gemara asks, and how much is considered greater than a sela? Yosef said, for example, if 3 date pits covered in remains of the date can fit through the hole with difficulty, or if without being covered in any remains they can fit comfortably, this is considered a hole larger than a sela. Says ובייס הקויסס יתנו לבנו מאחד שנמצאת באוי בייס הקויסס מצד אחד כשיר מצד שני צדדים טרפה נמצא עליה קורת דם. The Mishnah states if an animal is a treifa, or the omesam or the reticulum was perforated to the outside, meaning to the abdominal cavity, with regard to this, the sages taught in the case of a needle that is found in the thickness of the reticulum, if it pierced the wall from only one side, the animal is kosher. If it pierced the wall from both sides, meaning the needle completely pierced the wall of the stomach, it is a treifa. But even if it protrudes from both sides, if it it is not always a treifa, and it may be inspected further. If a drop of congealed blood is found on top of the needle, to be continued.